Our first talk is going to be by Reidentification at Kitware, and it's going to be on the MEVA large-scale multi-view, multimodal video data set for activity recognition. It's a big title. It's a big data set, and Roddy is a principal investigator at, principal engineer at Kitware, and he has been instrumental in building this data set from a data collection point of view and design. And so he's going to give us a deep dive into how this data set is produced. Roddy's been involved in many challenge evaluations over the years, building technology and data to help make video processing possible to solve critical information needs. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Reidentification.
Thanks, John. Let's see, so I've prepared a video. It has several sort of thematic areas, and I'll play the video, and then after each thematic sort of break ends, I'll pause the video for any questions and answers. Let's see, I'm going to start trying to share the screen here.
Okay, I think I might need to unshare.
Okay. Let's see.
Is that your screen? Awesome.
And I want to make sure that I am sharing the audio as well. So the video should have audio, so let me know if you don't hear the audio. Okay, so.
Hello, my name is Reidentification, and this presentation is an extended version of the video accompanying our WACV paper, MEVA, a large-scale multi-view, multimodal video dataset for activity detection. In this presentation, I'll give a brief overview of the MEVA dataset. I'll discuss the motivation and design goals for MEVA and take a look at how the dataset was scripted, staged, and collected. I'll also describe our process for annotating the ground camera data. I'll conclude with a brief summary of other data modalities available in MEVA which we have not yet developed into annotations. MEVA is a dataset for activity recognition consisting of data from ground-based cameras, UAVs, handheld devices, and GPS loggers. The main data component is over 9,300 hours of video from the suite of 38 ground-based EO and thermal IR cameras. Data was collected over roughly 3 weeks in March and May of 2018, observing approximately 100 actors conducting scripted and unscripted activity. We have annotated 144 hours of video for 37 activity types. The annotations include bounding boxes of actors and objects during their participation in the activity. Although most of the annotations are sequestered to support the National Institute of Standards and Technology's activities in extended video competition, we have released 22 hours of annotations together with 328 hours of ground camera video, 4.5 hours of UAV video, and GPS data on our website, mevadata.org. As of January 3rd, 2021, 42 terabytes of MEVA data have been downloaded from 82 distinct internet domains. An additional 125 domains have downloaded smaller subsets of the data. MEVA is part of Amazon's Open Data Registry, and we thank Amazon for sponsoring the storage and transfer of data from the website.
And so the main thing I'd like to sort of add at that point is that this data that we're discussing in this video corresponds to the known facility data that's part of the active track. So the video you're seeing here corresponds to the known facility.
Let's take a look at the factors that influence the design of MEVA. MEVA was sponsored by the IARPA Deep Intermodal Video Analytics, or DIVA, program. DIVA's focus is automatic activity detection and recognition in multi-camera environments. Datasets for evaluating activity recognition algorithms should meet several criteria. These include statistically significant counts of the activities of interest, which should be embedded in scenes containing realistic background activity. To ensure robustness, activities should occur in a variety of locations and environmental conditions, observed from multiple viewpoints, and acted out by a diverse group of actors. And, crucially, the data should be collected with appropriate human subject regulatory oversight to ensure releasability. As no existing dataset met all these criteria, we designed MEVA with these goals in mind. In this section, I'll describe how we planned and executed the data collection. Together with the program office, we developed a set of 37 activities. These included activities involving people acting alone, with other people, interacting with vehicles, and vehicle-only activities. Activities ranged from the commonplace to more rare activities that could possibly represent a threat of some sort. We defined these activities as precisely as possible to both facilitate annotation and to inform our overall collection plan. The definitions are available on our website. One of our goals was maximizing realism in the video across a time span of at least 10 to 15 minutes. This meant that across all the fields of view for that time period, the activities of interest needed to be embedded in a larger frame of reference which was semantically coherent. Thus, we developed the concept of scenarios such as a travel scenario or a foot race, which would guide the overall flow of actors to ensure semantic realism in background activities while allowing us to script in activities where needed. Before we could finalize the scenarios, we needed to pick a collection venue. The Muscatatuck Urban Training Center, or MUTC, is located in Butlerville, Indiana, about 90 minutes southeast of Indianapolis. Located on the site of a former state mental hospital, MUTC is operated by the Indiana National Guard as a training facility for first responders and military personnel. This footage is from the 2017 Guardian Response training exercise. MUTC was ideal for our purposes due to its variety of interconnected indoor and outdoor fields of view, potential locations for camera sighting, and availability for stretches of several weeks. Additionally, its access-controlled nature was crucial to satisfying requirements for our human subject research protocol. In August of 2017, we loaded up a van with cameras and recording equipment and props, and spent about a week at MUTC executing a pilot collect. We hired about 15 actors to explore fields of view, camera mounts, and how realistically we could script scenarios while achieving useful activity counts. We cannot overstate how valuable this pilot collect was when designing the main collection event. Based on our pilot collect, we identified about a dozen spots around the central core of MUTC, which provided a variety of environmental and semantic locations, yet were close enough to be logistically feasible. The overall recording area covered about 8 acres. Two of the lessons learned in the pilot collect were, 1, a small team cannot directly control or monitor the actions of 100 actors spread out across multiple locations, and 2, activities should not be scripted to a minute level of detail. Instead, we instituted a hierarchy where selected actors were designated as squad leads. Each squad lead was responsible for between 6 and 12 actors. Squad leads were trained to take high-level scripts for their squad that implemented overall scenario goals but did not specify the movement of individuals, and flow these down to their squad, making sure that everybody knew major milestones over the next time period while receiving just enough low-level direction to ensure realistic behavior and appropriate amounts of background activity. In this way, we could script out each day at a high level to ensure we were meeting program goals of diversity and activity counts without worrying about what every actor was doing. Once or twice during the day, the director team would meet with squad leads to distribute activity cards, make sure everybody had the big picture, and capture feedback on what was working and what wasn't. Squad leads would then scatter to their assigned locations and lead their squads through the day's activities. Squad leads had radio contact with the director team. Often we would execute a 15-minute scenario several times as we discovered and resolved issues with actor density, realism, and direction specificity. After developing our scripts, we packed up even more equipment and headed back to Mutsi. Per our human subject research protocol, signage was placed along the perimeter of the recording area. We set up a working cafe both as a source of activity instances and to allow actors to have some downtime and grab a snack. Cameras were installed and secured. Recording centers were set up in 4 locations around our recording area: the administration building, the abandoned hospital, the bus station, and the school building, which doubled as our command center. As actors arrived, we briefed them and made sure everybody had signed IRB consent forms. As the weeks went by, we quickly developed a rhythm of tasks for the start and end of each day. There was a daily supply run to keep the cafe stocked. There were 1 or 2 meetings per day with the squad leads, and constant adjustments in monitoring and mission control. Downtime was seized whenever available. Finally, it was time to say goodbye and thank you to our actors, pack our equipment, and head home with the fruits of our labor. We had collected the data. Now, we just had to annotate it.
So with that suspenseful pause there, I was just going to jump in and add one thing that was a huge learning experience for us as we were putting this data collect together was the IRB and human subject resource protocol requirements. One of the reasons an access controlled area was so important was one of the things we learned is that when you're filming people, as soon as you tell those people to do anything, whether or not it's a very commonplace thing, like as soon as you tell them to pick up a newspaper, or as soon as you give them any direction whatsoever, it transitions from observation into research, and everybody has to sign consent forms. And so as soon as we start scripting anybody, we had to have everybody on camera actively consenting to be as part of the data set. And so that was one of the reasons that that having a facility like Mutsi was so important. I see some questions coming up in the chat.
Yep.
Did we acquire videos only from the third person view? We later on in the talk, the actors were given handheld cameras. We had a couple of body worn cameras people were wearing as part of their roles as public safety officers. We haven't done a whole lot with that video yet, but we did collect some of it.
You have a second question there.
I do. Let's see. I don't see it on my chat.
Have you considered also the first person point of view?
Oh, I'm sorry. The first person point of view.
What does that mean?
I think that means did we have any videos from the handheld perspective? Did we give anybody any phones and say, oh my gosh, here's some video that was collected from the viewers, from the actor's point of view, as opposed to from this sort of third person point of view of the ground cameras. And so yes, people did have handheld devices, but we haven't done very much of that video yet. Okay, so I will resume sharing and continue.
Before discussing how we annotated MEVA, I'd like to review how annotating a dataset for evaluation differs from annotating for training something like a deep learning model. These points are taken from our GeoInt 2020 lightning talk, which was heavily informed by our DIVA experience. When annotating for training, particularly in deep learning, it's important to get as many examples as possible. However, not every frame of every video needs to be annotated because any part of the data not positively identified with a label may be ignored or sampled as background. The effects of a false negative, that is, presenting the system with a true activity but claiming it is not, are mitigated in the training process. Annotating for training can justify minimizing energy spent on corner cases because, by definition, such cases are rare relative to the bulk of instances. In contrast, annotations used in evaluation must be complete. For typical detection metrics, the absence of an activity label must be a positive indication that the activity is actually not present. In training, the effect of an inaccurate label may be mitigated by the training algorithm, but in evaluation, an inaccurate label will affect the score every time. As such, Corner cases where the definition is ambiguous must be addressed, which may in turn require updates to the definitions. These are the possible approaches to annotating a dataset such as MEVA. To review, the available resources are the activity definitions, the collection scripts, which only apply to time windows that were scripted, but can guide the annotation effort to areas known to contain certain activity types, and of course, the videos themselves. Option 1 is to use an in-house annotation team. Kitware has been developing an in-house team for annotating data across several projects, and they produce high-quality annotations with a very tight feedback loop. Regular meetings and shared documents ensure questions and feedback are handled quickly. However, the team is not large and does not have sufficient bandwidth to annotate MEVA to the scale required for evaluation. Option 2 is crowdsourcing, using a service such as Amazon Mechanical Turk. This has the advantage of lower cost and high throughput, but quality is notoriously variable, a problem exacerbated by the indirect and sometimes one-way communication from the requester to the worker. For complex activity definitions, such as those in MEVA, successful use of AMT typically requires structuring and curating the job distribution and reward process to identify and retain so-called golden workers who engage successfully with the task. Option 3 is to use a third-party commercial annotation provider. Many of these have appeared as part of the deep learning revolution. When successful, they provide a good balance of bandwidth for feedback and questions between an in-house team and crowdsourcing. They may also be able to provide predictable scaling. However, there is a cost in locating and establishing a relationship with the provider. They may have staff turnover, which can affect the quality of the work, and we have found that some providers require the use of their own in-house toolchain, which can be a source of friction. After experimenting with various combinations of these options, our eventual annotation pipeline evolved to use them all. The MEVA annotation pipeline starts with our third-party provider being assigned a bundle of video clips and performing what we call the grouper step on them. This involves reviewing the video for all instances of all activities of interest and marking the start and end boxes of each actor and prop involved in the activity. Tracks are not generated as part of the grouper process. If an activity is missed here, it will not be detected downstream. Hence, there is an audit step where Kitware annotators review the grouper output. The parameters of the audit step have evolved as our third-party provider has grown more accustomed to the data. The grouper output is then sent to Mechanical Turk for track generation. The Turkers are given the start and end boxes for each track with a linearly interpolated track to bootstrap the process. Turkers are asked to adjust the track and boxes using keyframes to keep the bounding boxes on the actor or prop. This results in a candidate activity annotation. This candidate is then sent to Gladiator, in which it is reviewed by 3 different Turkers who each give a simple thumbs up or thumbs down judgment on whether the tracks are good enough. If the candidate is passed by at least 2 of the 3 judges in the Gladiator step, it is added to the ground truth database. If it is rejected, it goes to the refiner process, in which it is sent back to AMT for further adjustment. If a candidate still fails Gladiator after 3 attempts, it is set aside for further auditing by Kitware annotators. This pipeline was used for both the MEVA annotations and the sequestered active data. The current activity distribution, also available via the website, is shown here. Note the logarithmic scale on the y-axis.
And so that's an overview of the process that we use to annotate the video data. Are there any questions about that? The process certainly it evolved as we were annotating, and it continues to evolve as we continue to annotate more data for the project. Okay,
could that process be deployed to other tasks? How portable?
At a conceptual level or at a software level? I think at a conceptual level, I think it's reasonably portable. Let me roll it back a little bit and share that slide again. So I think the framework is portable. I think the concept at the bottom there of using a Gladiator-like process where you crowdsource out and a concept of is this work product, whether it's an annotation, whether it's a detection, whether, whatever it is, crowdsourcing that out is, it's been pretty productive, and it's fairly portable. The infrastructure involved in the grouper step, I don't know how portable that is. So it's sort of a mix, possibly. Let's see. I think I heard a bing for a question come up. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, Roddy, but I would make a comment that this was annotation for activity tracks. So we had a space-time track or multiple space-time tracks for each activity. This would directly generalize to tracking. So if one wanted to do tracking independent of activities, it could easily be done this way with very modest refinements to a couple of steps here, but it would be very straightforward. We also had initially hoped to do track-based annotation of all movers all the time, and then label activities as intervals on tracks, but this proved to be too costly. You might note in the videos of the annotation, there's a lot of people in vehicles moving around sometimes that are not labeled. That means they're not doing one of the 37 activity types that we had defined. But when we started to do a full track annotation, even with this process, it was just deemed to be too expensive and too difficult. So we resorted back to just creating space-time tracks during activity instances. However, if one wanted to do tracking, and frankly, an obvious extension of this data is to do full tracks on the release data, then this type of pipeline could easily be done to tweak a little bit to do that.
Another aspect where I think if you replace the front end with a different task and then had a gladiator type paradigm would be re-identification. Because if you were doing a re-identification task, I think putting up a candidate re-identification in front of some circuits and saying, are these the same people? Yes, no. I think that would work well. So I'll continue.
Sequestered active data. The current activity distribution, also available via the website, is shown here. Note the logarithmic scale on the y-axis. Besides the ground camera data, MEVA contains other data modalities which have not yet been annotated. These include video from body-worn cameras and handheld devices, such as cell phones and tablets. This data has not yet been processed for release. Released data includes UAV video, GPS logs and enrollment photos of the actors, and camera models and 3D point clouds of the outdoor portions of the collection area. The UAV video comes from 2 DJI-inspired drones. Depending on the scenario, these were either flown sequentially or simultaneously. Typically, these focused on areas where scripting cued us that activity would be taking place. The drones had a flight ceiling of 400 feet. In all, we collected about 42 hours of drone video, 4.6 of which has been released. Each actor carried a GPS logger during the collect. Each logger has a unique ID, and the same actor carried the same logger each day of the collect. In aggregate, we have collected over 3 million track points. Each actor was also photographed each day front and back to obtain ground truth for their appearance. These enrollment photos also link the actor to their GPS logger ID, providing the opportunity for future efforts to leverage the GPS tracks to generate re-identification annotations. We have also provided a 3D point cloud model of the exterior of the collection venue, available on our website in 2 resolutions. Additionally, we have also provided camera models in KRTD format, georeferenced to a common coordinate system for exterior cameras. In conclusion, the MEVA dataset offers a unique resource to the activity detection research community. Please visit our website at mevadata.org. We welcome your contributions of annotations and suggestions. Thanks for watching.
So that's the prepared video. Happy to take any questions about the other data modalities or anything else that was discussed.
I see we have two chats. Is that? Yep. Okay. Those are all. I think that's my phone beeping. I'm sorry about that. Too many screens going on. Okay, well, thank you, Roddy. That was a question for you.
Yep.
How is the environment distribution? I'm not quite sure what that refers to. During the collection, so we collected for 2 weeks in March and 1 week in May. During the March collect, we had a little bit of a snowstorm. But most of the time we were actually pretty lucky with the weather. We had a couple of showers pass through, but nothing, we were, of course, the one thing you can't control is the weather. We were worried, well, what if there's a tornado watch? What if there's a, what if something catastrophic happens? And we were pretty lucky nothing like that happened.
So, Roddy, if you can explain the indoor, outdoor, or day and night information, that would be also helpful.
I think it was pretty evenly split indoor, outdoor, maybe a little more outdoor cameras. Some of the cameras were in patrol mode where they change a point of view every 15 or 20 seconds. We haven't done much with the changing point of view aspect of those videos. For several days, we left the cameras rolling 24 hours a day. After all of the actors had gone home, of course, there's not a lot happening, but we do have that data. And occasionally you'll see like wild animals walk past the outdoor cameras, or some sort of maintenance activity going on. Let's see, is an active National Guard base, and they have stuff going on at night. But that was we haven't prioritized the release or annotation of that data because not much is happening.
I would add to that we had infrared cameras of two varieties, as mentioned here, but quite briefly, there were thermal infrared cameras, so long wave, and that would operate, say, at night in the dark. And then there were near infrared cameras, which were the same as the normal RGB daylight cameras, but they flip over into an active illumination near infrared mode when it gets dark. So those would happen automatically. So those are bullet cameras, as they're called, which are surveillance cameras with a fixed viewpoint. When it got dark enough in their local environment, they would flip over to near infrared. So each evening, these cameras would flip on their near infrared mode if they were in a dark room, for example. And the thermal cameras, we just ran those day and night. They operate in both. They have slightly different appearance of the same scene at nighttime versus the daytime, which is interesting. They were also co-sighted with, every thermal IR camera is co-sighted with an RGB camera. So it's two cameras sitting right next to one another, such that the field of view of the infrared camera was fully inscribed in the field of view of the adjacent RGB camera. RGB cameras typically are much higher resolution, so they don't cover the same field of view. The IR field of view is smaller and lower resolution. But then we could annotate within the RGB camera and then transfer those annotations automatically to the infrared cameras because they're essentially the same viewpoint, which is convenient. So that is one unique aspect of this data set, is we do have both near infrared and thermal IR cameras and modes here. We had a couple of evening collects, as Roddy mentioned, but not just running the cameras overnight, but we did stay through the evening up until, say, 11 p.m. on a few different evenings and do some activities. There were not a lot of background activities happening, but we did some break-ins and the threat level activities that Roddy alluded to in those evening times. So we had a few different instances. So some of this stuff, what's in the public release versus the sequestered data is not, there's always a sample of what's available in the public data. but the sequestered data, annotated or not, has things that we aren't going to reveal here as well. There's also much more of it. So we have a lot of sequestered data. We released, as Roddy mentioned, 22 hours of camera data, camera hours, and we were annotating that, but it's still, there's a lot more that's in the sequestered side. And as to whether a particular evening event or overnight event or so on is in the public data is a question for the program. There is a general intention to release more data, and potentially when the MEVA program ends, we've sponsored this. A lot more data could be released without annotations. We can't afford to annotate all of it, but there is a lot of data out there that potentially could put out into the community for people to volunteer to annotate in certain ways.
Okay, great. Any further questions or comments for our speaker?
As Rodney mentioned, we do have the identities of all of the actors abstracted to a global identifier number. Obviously, we're not releasing their names and information about the individuals, but those identities are consistent across multiple days. We did collections in March and May, and across the March collection, for example, there was a global ID for each individual. So each of the multiple days of collection, that GPS ID and that individual is known. So we have a re-identification data set here that is second to none, as far as I know, in terms of the depth of the data. We've not annotated for that yet, but we probably, well, we hope to, let's say, such that the activity done on Tuesday is the same person who did another activity on Thursday afternoon in this data set. So there's a ton of potential there for re-identification across a large scale in space and time and number of individuals, much more so than any other data sets that we know of.
Are there any other tasks or research that you would like to see performed on this data set? I think re-ID is definitely one. Are there other things that you wish that we had done with the data set?
There's two, tracking and composition or complex activity detection. So tracking first, as I mentioned, we could not afford to do full track annotations on all of the data, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it on some of the data. So I think it would be very useful to annotate some of the data completely for all movers, just with tracks, and create a substantial tracking data set. We have the opportunity here to create a tracking data set, again, that's far beyond what exists now that I'm aware of for surveillance style data for persons and vehicles. We do have those identities. We have GPS tracks. We have multiple camera overlap. We have lots of tools to help us do that tracking problem automatically or semi-automatically. We are working on this at Kitware to do a full tracking solution and then clean it up a little bit. Hopefully we'll be able to get a lot of that done and release in the next 6 months or so. So we are working on that, but we don't have an annotation pipeline yet for it. We don't know how much the automatic process is going to solve it, but our plan is to do fully automated tracking including, say, the UAV video, the GPS tracks, and the multiple cameras. This is for outdoor scenes. Indoor, we don't have GPS to help us. In some cases, we have multiple cameras, and some we don't, and tracking would be very difficult. So that's one thing, is to create a full, complete tracking annotation data set for at least some of the data. And the second thing that I would really like to see is compositional activity detection, where right now our activities are pretty local. There are things like picking up an object, exiting a facility, and so on. But one can envision the definition of, and it was the vision of the program right from the beginning, was to have higher order activities where we have an individual who, say, is initially sitting down in a facility. They stand up, they exit the facility, they walk to a vehicle and get in the vehicle and drive away. Can we recognize that sequence of activities where it spans across multiple cameras, potentially non-overlapping fields of view, so there's a re-ID component, and distinguish that from someone who does the first 3 steps, but doesn't get in a car and drives away. Instead, walks past cars and exits the field of view without driving away. So I think that is enabled by this data set. It's enabled by the activity definitions we have already and the annotations we have already. The only missing piece there is reidentification across those activities so that we can say that a particular instance was done by the same individual or not. So if we do that annotation, then we should enable detection of these large-scale compositional or complex activities, which would be, again, a data set that I think doesn't really exist right now.
Anthony and Roddy, could you actually briefly explain how the research community can contribute to annotate the data, if you don't mind? Yeah.
Sure. There, if you look on the website, maybe I could. If you look on the website, the annotations are stored in a Git repo. We have a schema out there for generating the annotations, and if you check out the repo and make a branch, add your annotations, and then file it with a merge request, we can add them in to sort of, they'll be there in the repo. That's probably the easiest, the most straightforward way to contribute annotations.
The DIVA performers, the DIVA, there's 6 DIVA teams, and now there's a number of other institutions spread across the program because those teams have multiple members, and there's been a large contribution by the performers to these annotations. And the process has evolved on the program. We've learned some lessons there. I think the key is that if people want to contribute annotations, it's strongly encouraged and welcomed, but those annotations need to be consistent with the existing annotations or they're really not useful. So they need to follow the definitions. They can't change the definitions of the activity types that are there. They can't merge multiple ones together. They need to be of approximately the same quality, bounding boxes on the individuals and so on. If we have annotations that are contributed with systematic biases that are different than what's there already, then it distorts the data set significantly, and those data sets will not, those annotations will not be included. So it's great to have people contributing, but they must contribute according to the system that's been set up and the definitions that are already there. And we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of annotations according to the existing structure. And if somebody wants to contribute annotations, that's great, but they have to be consistent with what's there in order to fold in. If you want to annotate for a different problem, that's great. And then those would be separate annotations, and those would be interesting and useful too. I want to add an activity type. That'd be an interesting contribution. But to add instances of the same activities, they have to be consistent. And that can be a little tricky, but it's strongly encouraged, and the performers have been doing that. It's been quite a leveraging across the team to create annotations for multiple institutions.